How you doing, green industry business leaders? This is episode number 16 of the Green Industry Profits Podcast, where we talk about how green industry companies can grow in a profitable way. In today's episode, we had a conversation with Weston Zimmerman of SynkedUP. We dive into budgeting, sales and marketing, job costing, and much more. And before we dive into this episode, just a quick note that this podcast is brought to you by Cycle CPA, a remote accounting firm that works specifically with green industry businesses. For more information, go to cyclecpa.com. And without further ado, let's get into today's episode. All right, everyone. Super excited for this episode here. Weston Zimmerman with SynkedUP software is joining us today. And if you've been to any of the major green industry events or expos, you might have even come across Weston speaking, or maybe if you stopped by his booth or seen some of his content. Great stuff, and super excited to kind of hear his perspective on maybe what he's seeing out there in the industry. And but thanks a lot for joining us here, Weston.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Joe. It's been a pleasure knowing you over the years. And like you said, meeting each other at these events. I think we actually even had we kind of started at similar times, I think, if I remember correctly. So it's kind of been fun to watch each other's companies grow and hear about it, indirectly through other people that are using your services and that kind of thing. So thanks for having me on. I'm enjoying this and looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome stuff, Weston. I guess you mind starting with, maybe those that aren't familiar with you, maybe your background and how you got into the industry, and then I guess leading up even to your time at SynkedUP.
Absolutely. I started working for a company called Tussie Landscaping here in Central PA. I jokingly refer to it as Podunkville, PA. Yeah, there's no airport you can fly to get here, type deal. This is where I grew up. It's beautiful. It's in the middle of the Appalachian Mountains. When I was 16, I ran into one of the owners of Tussie Landscaping and asked him for a job and started working there before I even had my driver's license. I was biking to work both morning and evening. And I started there just as a laborer on the crew, $8 an hour. That's a different era, But I worked there for 15, 16 years. And over that time, I eventually became a crew leader and eventually started working more and more into just like the leadership type stuff with, getting our business off of paper and into better systems and processes. I also started doing all the marketing and content for the company, like in the winters. Like I wanted full-time work, but I was running a crew, so that was seasonal. So I started kind of diving into the marketing aspect and really worked up to the point where I was really doing 2 full-time gigs at Tussie Landscaping. And through that whole experience where I mentioned leading the company and getting off of paper and into better systems and processes, we started using, a number of different products out there, and they were all good for their individual pain points that they solved. But the challenge, what we wanted was where you could build a company budget to establish what you should be charging, estimate and win jobs, track the schedule and track those jobs, and then bill for those jobs all in one system. So picture, back office to frontline field workers all in one system. So frontline field workers like us were getting exactly what we needed to do the job well and effectively and on time, all the information, and the back office could see what was happening in the front field, in terms of progress and tracking jobs and resources. But that didn't really exist. And so we were dealing with trying to run, manual spreadsheets and QuickBooks and multiple other products with scheduling and mobile apps and all of that. And it was all scattered across many places, which was tough. Today, integrations make some of that stuff a little easier, but still, it was a challenge. And I remember coming home from work one day. My dad worked for a company that had a custom software development division, although I didn't really know about it or really pay any attention to it until one day I came home from work in the middle of this experience that we were living through at Tussie, and I saw him clicking on some grass on his back. He was working on his laptop on the back patio. And I saw him clicking on some grass, and I was curious. I was like, "What are you doing?" And he was showing me how he was testing a software project, and so that's where the light bulb went on. And I was just an employee at Tussie, but involved in a lot of this stuff. So I just went back to the owners and pitch this idea of like, hey, let's build this, let's build this solution that doesn't exist. And I kind of laugh and say that was probably one of the most naive things I ever said. But believe it or not, the owners of the company kind of were like, sure, let's go. Steve and Matt Martin, they were fantastic people to work for, still run one of the best businesses I know of. And so they, bought into the vision and off we went, developing what today is SynkedUP, which is pretty much exactly what I said we didn't have, which is a software platform to start with budgeting, estimating, sending out proposals, winning the work, scheduling and tracking the work, and invoicing for it. And the power is in setting your pricing correctly, which comes from the budgeting and estimating aspects, and then making sure that we're estimating the correct amount of resources and jobs, which comes from the job costing, where we can see exactly estimated versus actual, labor, materials, etc., for every job, so that we don't repeatedly make mistakes like underbidding hours or underbidding materials, and we know exactly where we're at. And then, of course, the frontline field, workers like I was, we built the mobile app to serve that persona that, like, look, like I lived that life for years. And so when we were building this thing, it was like, okay, what do I want as a crew leader to do the job effectively? I want to know the estimated hours. I want to know work areas that did not get approved on the proposal because those are great upsell opportunities. I want to know what's on my schedule for next week so I can start mentally prepping for that. I want to see the materials that are in that job so I can think about the logistics and handling, getting materials on site on time, like all those real life things that a crew leader lives through every day, we build into that mobile app. So it's really, regardless whether you're an estimator or a salesperson, whether you're an owner, whether you're an office admin, or whether you're a crew lead or a crew member for that matter, the app is serving every persona equally.
Awesome. A lot to unpack there, Weston. I do also want to mention, the team over there at Tussy, including yourself. I mean, very impressive operation and great people. So awesome stuff.
Yeah.
And I think it's great that the software was developed even as Tussy Landscape still exists. Even the ownership, and kind of really trying to solve, okay, what are the actual issues that are being faced, and even as different things come up, and kind of keeping that communication flow going and really trying to solve some of those core issues going on. Whereas I know a lot of software companies, they may be a little out of touch with some of those items. Maybe okay, what is actually okay? What are some of these things that may look nice and may be announced and different things like that versus okay, what are things that person in the crew, like you're saying in the field, actually needs in order to actually utilize the software better or maybe easier. So um, that's that's great stuff. Now, starting with the marketing piece, I'd love to touch on that before we dive deep into some of the numbers and the software aspect, because I think marketing helps to just increase sales, right? Which ultimately that's really important, to hit your budget revenue numbers. I know you built a great YouTube channel on Tussy and just the overall marketing. I guess what is your approach with that aspect? Even as you've grown SynkedUP. I mean, I think it's there's a pattern here. I think you're definitely have a skill with that. I guess what are some tips and advice you might have for those listening?
Um, well, if you own a business, like you said, marketing is critical. You got to do it. And I think some of the most overlooked aspects of it is just the stuff that you can do that's free. But it requires discipline, consistency, a plan, somebody owns it. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't just happen. It's a little bit like, sure, we all want a six pack, but only a percentage of us are willing to go to the gym. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's a little bit like that. Like so much of life is. But I think what I see is that often owner operators of businesses kind of look at marketing like a black box and they just want to like hire somebody to deliver a silver bullet to them. And sure, any agency in the world will be happy to take your money. And there's good agencies and there's bad agencies, right? But the thing is how are you supposed to know that? And they're happy to take your money. It's so easy to spend money on marketing and get nothing for it, or do some things really, really well and get incredible ROI on it. And it's not necessarily driven by how much money you've spent on it. It's more about the strategy and execution and making sure it's actually effective and finding the right people. Really, that's what marketing is finding the people that buy your services. Um, And so some things that I think, like you mentioned, like content creation, the YouTube channel, some things that I think that are free in terms of dollars, not free in terms of time and discipline, which sometimes it's easier to spend the money than it is to allocate time and discipline. Um, is the content creation, is the things like I think something that people overlook so much is just the power of having a well-built, well filled out Google listing. Like put the pictures of your services on there. And don't go screenshotting images off Google image search. Like take the time it takes to get good quality photos of your work. Um, so Google listing is huge. Like another one is Google reviews on your Google listing. Like that is so powerful. Like you could go spend tens of thousands of dollars and get a really well-built website over the course of 6, 12, 18, 24 months that begins to rank on SEO and get to the top of Google search results. Yes, that you could do that. Um, and you should, honestly. But what you could do for free is build out a good Google listing, get Google reviews every week, multiple times a month, from your customers. And you know what will show when you go search for a landscaper near me? You know what will show at the top? Above the top website is the Google Maps listing of the landscaper with the most recent and the most quantity of Google reviews and well filled out services. Like that doesn't cost you a nickel other than just getting reviews and all of that. So I think that's a really overlooked way that doesn't cost anything. And if you don't have that and you're complaining you don't get work, well, there's some work to be done for free, right? It doesn't take much. The other aspect is content creation. I think so much of the time we probably over engineer in our heads what it means to do content creation. Like, oh, I'm not natural on camera or whatever. Like nobody is. And when you think you sound weird on a video, well, guess what? That's how you sound to everybody all the time anyway. So you may as well get over it. You know what I mean? So, but it is something to get over like mentally because it took me probably a year or two before I started feeling a little more, and I still get brain cramped. What am I doing it now for over 10 years? There's still moments when I get brain cramped and like that sounds so weird. Let me reshoot that. You know what I mean? Like so just it's part of the process. Um, but content creation, I think it's I don't know. I know there's cases where you do run into businesses that they don't have any social media presence and don't do any content creation, but I don't know. It's just such a huge opportunity that if you're not tapping into, it's an opportunity, is what I'll say. Like I guess you don't have to, and there's plenty of successful businesses out there that don't make content a part of their strategy, but it's such a big opportunity and it's only going to grow, not diminish, in the future. So it just seems to me like the planted when's the best time to plant a tree, 5 years ago. Well, if you haven't done it 5 years ago, then today. That's kind of the way I look at content. Um, so getting over yourself and just starting, and you can just start simple, record time lapses of your jobs going in. People come up with so cool, original ideas. Like it doesn't have to be something that you go hire a dedicated editor and all of that right out of the gate. You can start small. It's not who spends the most money that wins, is kind of the point I'm trying to make. It comes down to doing the simple things really well.
Absolutely. And now when it comes to hitting your sales and marketing, I think especially as contractors adjust their pricing because now they create a budget, right? And now they actually have to charge a little bit higher. I guess what is that something you see companies kind of running into in regard to maybe as they're making certain adjustments like that and as their company grows?
You mean like with a concern about like they're spending the money but not recovering the cost then? Is that what you're referring to?
So I'm referring to more when maybe a company hasn't been tracking their numbers as well.
Uh-huh.
And now all of a sudden they are, and they're creating a budget where they're actually having to recoup all their expenses.
Uh,
And now they're trying to increase, prices and maybe having trouble on the sales side because of that.
yes. So the thing of, oh, I built a budget. Now I truly see the truth about what I have to charge to cover all the money I'm spending, marketing, etc. And now having trouble on the sales side because it's significantly higher than what I've been charging up until now. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah.
Yeah. So My opinion on this doesn't really coddle any feelings, I'll tell you that. I don't think, I don't think if you're saying I can't win work because of price, I think that's a cop out. I don't think that's the truth. Like another way I've mentioned this is like from a business perspective, build a budget, get to the truth about your numbers as quickly as possible. As soon as you know what those numbers are, turn around and develop yourself as a salesperson. Because blaming the price for not closing work is a cop out answer. Either work on becoming better with your numbers so you can charge less, be more efficient with the same overhead infrastructure, whatever, or do more work with the same infrastructure, like become more efficient essentially on per dollar spent on your overhead infrastructure, right? Um, or develop your skills as a salesperson. Most of us as contractors out there, I think, underestimate the power in that. And we just think, oh, well, if we do good work for people, they'll buy. Yes, that is true, but it depends how big of it depends on your market and what kind of overhead infrastructure you're building. Like if you're building a 6 crew company, that's a beast that needs to be fed, and you need to sell work to feed that thing. Um, and that requires sales skills. And so saying that I can't win work because my price is now more than what it used to be, or what I think I'm worth is really what you're saying. I think I'm worth $75 an hour. My budget tells me I have to charge 100. I cannot mentally get there to where I think I can charge 100. That's a mental battle that's inside of your head, not your clients.
Yeah.
And so it really comes down to value. Like, and I'll piggyback off of that and say also that if you're going to try to build a business off of being the most competitively priced, forget it. You won't do it. You can't do it. It's impossible. You cannot do it because there's always someone else out there that hasn't yet fully grasped the realities of what it costs to run a business, and they're charging $55 an hour, and they think it's better. They think they're rich because they used to get paid 25 at their job and now they're making 55, and they think it's unbelievable. It just hasn't caught up to them yet. And those people will always be out there. Always. So you can never win, you can never grow a profitable business off of being the cheapest. Argue with me if you want, show me an example. I haven't seen it, you know. And so my point is stop trying to win work on being on feeling good about being the most economically priced. Start winning work based on the fact that you provide better service and value than your competitor. That's where you will win more business by being the easiest to do business with than the lowest price ever will. You will win more business by getting proposals back immediately than being the cheapest ever will. Like there are so many things that you can do that will win you business that has nothing to do with price.
Yeah. And now, because I think this is incredibly common, especially for companies that are starting out in the first couple of years, and then kind of, because it may not be the number one priority as a company starts, is you're just trying to get your name out in the community, get some sales in, stuff like that, and then you kind of have that realization that, wow, doing more work is actually not um, going to my bottom line as much as I'd like for it to be. So, um, making those certain adjustments. Now, with the budget, Weston, what is your philosophy with that? Yeah, and in regard to, I guess, your approach with helping companies build the budget.
Yeah. And um, to clarify, when I say build a budget, what I really mean is put in all my numbers that put in every dollar my business spends to stay in business, like pay the light bill, pay the fuel bill, pay the insurance, all of that. Put in every dollar my business spends so that I can mathematically figure out what I need to charge per hour or what my markups need to be to cover all of my costs, both direct and indirect or overhead. So I can arrive at a break even plus add my net profit margin. Now I arrived at my price. That's what I mean when I say I build a budget. Sometimes, from your perspective, I imagine like in the accounting world, building a budget could have different purposes or business problem statements. You know what I mean? Like it's not about so you can arrive at what you should charge. So I just wanted to clarify that. Like when in the synced up context, when we say build a budget, it's really so that we can figure out and answer the question to what should I be charging mathematically speaking, so that I can actually earn a profit after I've paid all my bills. Um, and my philosophy is kind of simple. It's just every dollar that your business spends has to be there somewhere in that budget, because every dollar that your business spends that was not in the budget because you missed it or you forgot or you added the expense and didn't add it into the budget, what was supposed to be your profit is what's going to go pay for that expense that was not in the budget. So the simplest minds, like the simplest frame I use to look at the budget is like, my business spend it, is it in the budget? Make sure it's in the budget. And then even after I put in all the expenses that I know of that I put in my budget, I even like to just put in a bit of a buffer for unanticipated expenses, because you know how it's, you know what it is, like maybe repairs and maintenance was worse this year than we had anticipated, you know, we had
Yep.
breakdowns or whatever, or maybe a really good deal came up on a piece of equipment that we weren't planning on buying yet for another 2 years, so we bought it. You know, all kinds of things can happen. um so I like to have a bit of a buffer so that it, you know, the same way when you're bidding a job, budget worst case scenario. If you think you can get it done in 80 hours, but you know you can get it done in 100 hours, bid it for 100 hours. Same way with a budget. If I think I'm going to spend $15,000 a year on fuel, but I know I won't spend more than 18, put 18 in. You know, same concept. Always budget for worst case scenario, which will essentially then make sure that you never have your dollars in your profit bucket going to cover gaps in your overhead and expenses bucket. If that's what's happening chronically for contractors all over the world. And that's what we mean by building a budget. Just literally make sure that every dollar your business spends is in there. And if you don't like what your budget is telling you, like maybe you charging $95 an hour and your budget is telling you have to charge 127, you're like, that's no way. You know, it's kind of the same thing we were saying earlier. I can never charge that, blah, 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 blah. Okay, fine. Math doesn't lie. Math doesn't care about your feelings. Math doesn't care about your head trash. You got two options: either cut expenses or become more efficient and do more work without incurring additional expenses. Become more efficient essentially with the overhead infrastructure you built. And I like kind of that graph that you guys shared. It's been a long time, but it stuck with me ever since you guys shared it one time on your social media at Cycle CPA. It was like this graph of like how you invest into your overhead infrastructure, like you buy a new equipment or you add another crew or you add, whatever. So your overhead infrastructure kind of climbs, and then your revenue kind of grows more of a steady, right?
Yeah.
And so you get to the point where you might have 5% net profit at a key moment when you add to your overhead infrastructure, but then the overhead infrastructure kind of levels out again, the revenue keeps growing. You know, so there's like this uneven association, and the
Yeah.
budget tries its best to even that out so your net profit is always consistent.
Yeah. And I think to kind of go off that point, Weston, how often do you recommend for companies to analyze their budget and maybe even adjust it even within SynkedUP?
Yeah. You literally cannot overdo it. We have users in SynkedUP that do it weekly, and I love it because I'm like, that company will never have a dollar that goes out their door that they don't know about. I
Yeah.
love that. But the real truth is contractors, we as contractors, we love to do what we do. We got into this business because we love the craft. We're proud of what the art we can create or whatever, you know,
Yeah.
and not because we love poring over P&Ls and numbers. And that's not why we started the business. Is, you know, is our story. So um we my mantra on this is pretty much like, hey, bare minimum, update it annually. If and quarterly is better than annually, monthly is better than quarterly, weekly is better than monthly. Basically, the less frequent that you update the budget, the more buffer that you have to build in for unanticipated expenses, because you will spend money you had not known about or thought about since you last updated your budget in January, let's say.
Yeah.
So the less frequent the update, the bigger the buffer has to be, which means it's going to drive your price up, right? And but I think a healthy company should be reviewing and updating their budget at least monthly,
Yeah.
and make it part of your monthly closeout process for your books or whatever. You know, like, just, okay, let's look at the P&L line by line. Let's look. And the cool thing is the more often you do it, the less of a burdensome task it is. It can literally be a 5-minute task if you
Yeah.
do it if you do it monthly.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, I totally agree, Weston. And starting with the top line revenue number, because there's some contractors that I think, and it's great to be positive, right? And I think try to shoot for a high number with that. Um, and I'm interested to kind of hear your thoughts on this. Sometimes we see companies being, I think, a little bit too optimistic with their top line sales and maybe, thinking that they're going to hit a certain revenue number and then maybe almost budging in or taking on a little bit more expenses than they should. Um, do you ever see stuff like that happening, or I guess, do you have any philosophy around, I guess, looking at that top line sales number?
Yeah, I mean the top sign, what is that quote? Revenue is vanity, profits are sanity, something along those lines, right? So,
Yep.
I don't care if you're making 10 million, I don't care if you're making 100 million top line, if you're making no profit, it makes no difference.
Yeah.
It's useless if there's no profit on it. Um, but like let's say you overshoot, maybe you really like go and invest into your business and really add a lot of overhead expenses and you're really growing the infrastructure of your business, which means that your top line revenue must grow to support covering those expenses essentially. um the way I like to think about it is to take, if you wonder if you can afford a new thing like hiring an office admin or adding a new truck or adding a second crew, I like to use budgets as a playground. So I'll copy my budget and I'll start adding those expenses in and seeing what that hourly rate would be if I had all of these expenses. And then the way I like to approach it is say, okay, um, I'm going to use those rates in my hypothetical budget and see if I can sell the work. If I can sell the work, there's my permission to go spend the money. So I like to let the market tell me if I have permission to spend the money before I go spend the money, as opposed to spending the money, signing off on those equipment loans and all of that, and then being flabbergasted and stressed when I am not selling the work, which kind of comes back to my original earlier point about build your budget and then go develop yourself as a salesperson, because your ceiling, your cap is based on your sales abilities, not necessarily on your price.
Yeah. No, that's a great point, Weston. I think what I like to look at it sometimes is, okay, you want to double the company. What is your confidence that you can double in other aspects of the company to be able to support that? Maybe, like help with your sales and marketing, or do you have the recruiting engine to kind of keep up with it? And I think that sometimes when companies first start out, they almost forget that, yeah, no, it was pretty difficult, or, there were certain things that had to be worked out in order for us to get to this point. Doubling in size is going to take that change in the infrastructure and those different adjustments. So keeping that in mind, and I think no, but those are great points,
Yeah,
Weston. And then looking at some of the direct costs and managing the field, and even just maybe how SynkedUP is able to kind of help with that. You mind kind of diving into, um, you know, how SynkedUP is able to help with some of the field efficiencies and management.
yeah. And this is what I like about numbers is numbers never lie. They don't care about how you feel about a certain thing. It just shows you the truth, right?
Yeah,
And then of course we draw, we grasp and try to draw theories as to explain what they mean or what story their data is telling us. But to answer your question, I like to so what I see happen a lot is contractors bidding jobs as if they were there on the job site every minute of the day, right? Like, it's like, oh, dude, we can do this in 3 days. Like, sure, maybe you could, but what about your crew? Might be 5 days for them because maybe they're only 2 years with you and they need some more training. All of those things. Um, so you have to bid jobs according to what whoever is doing the job can do it. And if it's not you, which it very likely is not you as the owner operator, as you're trying to grow the business, like what you were saying, double the company, well, that means you cannot be physically present on every job site, which means that it's gonna impact other things like hours, maybe efficiency even on materials, because whatever you can logistical efficiency because your crew's learning. It takes time to learn these
yeah,
things, and so it's not going to be as good as you have had it when you're, say, maybe at the peak of your efficiency as the owner operator before you started adding crew leaders and like working yourself out of the field or whatever it is that you're doing. And so where I'm coming to the point I'm making with this is bid the jobs for what they're going to take the crew that's doing them, not based on what you can do them. And I see this mistake happen all the time where the owner or the salesperson then gets frustrated because it's like, why is it taking my crew so long? Da 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 da. Like it's 20%, they're 20% of our hours every time, and they beat on the crew instead of saying, you know what, maybe I need to change my estimating. And
Yeah.
this is what I love about, so this is what SynkedUP helps you with is as you are completing the work and materials and hours and all of that are getting logged in the mobile app, it's giving you real-time status of estimated versus actual materials, hours, subcontractors, equipment, everything. So you can see exactly where you're going right or where you're going wrong or where you're going over or where you're going under. And then don't argue with the data. You know, when you see that you went way over on a particular aspect of a job, don't argue with it. Just ask why as a team collectively, the crew, the salesperson, everybody collectively. How do we not repeat this mistake again? Why did it? Was it an anomaly and we don't want to adjust our estimating practices in the future? Or was it no, this is a pattern. We do need to adjust our estimating practices in the future. And having the power of that real-time estimated versus actual job costing at your fingertips at all times is absolutely, like, I can't overemphasize the power that that puts into your hands as a business owner, because you can essentially make almost like real-time decisions that will close off profit leaks and job site overruns. And I'll tell you a story that gives an example of this. So when I was running a crew at Tussey, before we had this real-time job costing and SynkedUP, we were doing it manually in spreadsheets, which I'm sure many people are doing. And it worked. It was just very manual, very human, like labor intensive type of a process. And so what does that mean? Well, it meant it took forever to get the final numbers in, right? And so the before we had SynkedUP, I would sometimes get a phone call from the salesperson weeks after the job was done saying, "Hey, we went over hours on so and so or whatever. Like, why do you think that was?" And the quality of my answer as the crew leader was terrible because it was weeks after. I was in my third or fourth job since then, and I rarely had good, relevant answers to give. Right? It was like, man, I'd scratch my head. Maybe it was this, maybe it was that, but I'm focused on production for the job I'm on right now, and my brain wasn't really tied to that. Well, the script completely flipped after we got SynkedUP and real-time job costing because I had that progress bar right in my mobile app. And instead of the salesperson calling me weeks after, I, as the crew leader, was calling the salesperson before we were even done with the job saying, "Hey, we're only half done with the job. We already are at 80% hours. We're going to go over. And here's why I think we're going to go over." And sometimes it was, hey, it's an anomaly. Materials didn't show up. The client was really difficult. We got pounded by weather, whatever it was. It was an anomaly. Don't pay any attention to it. It was just a bad stroke of luck. Or it was like, no, like, dude, salesperson, like, we need more hours for this type of work. Like, we've been crushing it in terms of production and efficiency, and there's still not enough hours in here. And so the quality of our learning increased exponentially. And the point I'm making is when you have that at your fingertips, it is tremendous for the net profit that your business will generate, as opposed to, well, I'll tell you what happens if you're not job costing. The first indication that you're going over hours and materials and et cetera, like you have job site overruns, the first indication that you will have if you are not job costing is cash flow. And by the time your cash flow is spelling trouble, you are months downstream of the source of the problem. And once you do realize you do have a problem and you are months downstream of the problem, the $1 million question is, well, why? What do we need to fix? What do we need to change? And the truth is, without job costing, you have no idea. You have a good
Yeah.
educated guess at best.
Yeah. Absolutely. Especially with the install based work. I think there's positives and negatives to maybe some of the reoccurring based work versus more of that one-time install work. I think with the install work, it's great where you can gain some of the revenue a lot quicker with some of the larger projects. Um, but the other side of it, I think contractors need to get really serious about getting more granular with the numbers, because then, like you said, Weston, they are going to get cash flow issues. And instead of waiting until the end of the year for tax purposes to finally see your numbers and how your company's doing, having that quicker feedback loop is incredibly important. And I think that goes along with, and it's almost like a form of like testing, right? If you're doing a different kind of job, or if you're trying to see, okay, how is this crew going to do without me in the field watching over them, right? The same way companies should be testing things like maybe like Facebook ads, or which one is working best, or recruiting channels, right? I think it's important have that quick feedback loop, and that's going to allow you to just get better and better over time. And even when it comes to you know you, being able to have that quicker feedback loop, even with the sales team, right? So that they understand, like you said, you actually were the one that reaching out to the salesperson, say, listen, I think my guys are working really hard. I think maybe your estimate was a little overly optimistic, right?
Yeah. And I think sometimes crew leaders get shy away from job costing because they feel like the owner is just going to be beating them over the head with it when they run over a job. But like my thing is like, no, don't let that be in your company culture. The only price, the only price quotation marks of running over a job is that you as the crew explain to me your hypotheses of why that we went over on the job. Lay it on the salesperson, lay it on the production, lay it on the weather. I don't care. The only price of running, the only, you know, punishment on the crew for running over a job is tell me your opinion on why we went over.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, no, for sure. And Weston, you also touched on just the ability to get that job posting information. Can you give us an idea of, because I think this is something that definitely separates SynkedUP from other softwares in regard to how the crew leaders and the crew are able to kind of track their time, and how that kind of links to kind of the software and then like the data in the back end.
Yeah. So the fundamental challenge with job costing is just collecting the data of hours, materials, receipts, all of that stuff, right? That's the hard part. And receipts go missing and hours don't get tracked, allocated to a job. And you just get a text message from your crew lead that says, I worked 40 hours this week. And like, okay, cool. I know that you worked 40 hours, but unless I know where those hours went, I'm blind in terms of job costing and actually knowing where my business is making money or not making money. And so that's the challenge, is like logging those actuals. So SynkedUP's mobile app is all about making it easy for the crew lead or the crew members of any crew members to log their time, and simultaneously, while they are logging their time, have all the job information at their fingertips. We call it the digital job folder, where material lists, estimated hours, notes, pictures, addresses, and phone numbers, like everything is at your fingertips. So you can basically, as a crew lead or a crew member, be mentally prepped, planning logistically how you're going to handle the job site. And having all that stuff at your fingertips is like, just imagine like what it costs every time you have to run back to the shop to get a skid of pavers that you didn't realize you needed, and you can't move on the job site until that's done. You know what I mean? Like every time you do that, not only do you pay for the direct costs of the labor running back and getting the stuff that you need or whatever, but you also pay for the opportunity cost. Now you burned half a day that you can no longer use on any other job for the rest of the year. And the opportunity cost is really expensive. So what the SynkedUP mobile app really it's about making it really easy to log the actuals, hours, what materials I used, receipts, that kind of thing, as well as in real time show the same feedback loop that the owner and the salesperson is seeing to the crew lead, estimate versus actual hours, blah blah, all that stuff, so that the crew lead can see the cause and effect and also be able to give high quality opinions as to why, explaining why when things go well or don't go well. Because the crew, they're the ones with boots on the ground. They're the ones that know. Everybody else is just wondering. The owner, salesperson, everybody else is just wondering why, what happened, right? The crew is the ones that actually know. So when you go over, you know who's going to know? It's the crew.
Yeah, absolutely. And whenever companies come to us, Weston, and maybe they only have QuickBooks or not even QuickBooks yet, and they even are very curious about job costing, we always recommend for them to reach out to SynkedUP, because I think that it's become something that um, is just so important for a company. It's and I think for the same reason why I think it's great, and what we recommend before companies even get started is maybe working for a company already and trying to see what their processes are, and maybe learning from their mistakes. Similar to using resources like SynkedUp, you want to be able to expedite that learning curve as much as possible, right? So instead of going a full year or a couple of years and then realizing, okay, something's off here, it allows you to to, learn a lot quicker. So
100%. And I hear I hear so often from companies that come into SynkedUP and finally understand the mathematical thing of budgeting and how it sets the rates for them. They're like, oh my goodness, I lost hundreds of thousands of dollars. The cost of ignoring this for as long as I did was hundreds of thousands of dollars. Way back in the early days of year 1, 2, and 3 of my business, I would tell myself that I'm not big enough. I don't need to spend a couple $100 a month on a software. And that narrative, me telling myself that, cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars instead of it's tripping over pennies to pick up, or tripping over dollars to pick up pennies. And so,
yeah,
yes, I know a product like SynkedUP, it's not exactly like an impulse buy. It is a couple $100 a month, but on the other end of that, when you finally do start paying attention to this in your business, and fine, you don't have to do SynkedUP. You can do it in spreadsheets. It's just going to take you forever. Sorry. It's just that SynkedUP just makes it easier. It's not like SynkedUP has some for wizardry magic under the box. It's just taking spreadsheet type power, and math and putting it into an easy to use software package. But yeah, sure, you don't have to use software. You can do everything that SynkedUP does manually on the back of a napkin if you want to. It's just that it's going to take forever. And the cost of ignoring this, or saying, I'm not an accountant, I'm not a tech guy, I'm not a numbers guy, I just want to feel good about charging $100 an hour and think I'm making money. And the cost of ignoring the reality and the truth, the cost of not knowing, is costing you much more than what you realize.
yeah, absolutely. And Weston, I know that there's a lot to control just internally within companies, and not to necessarily look at the market and the economy as an excuse, but are you seeing anything, this past year or so versus maybe even during COVID, any changes as you're kind of, talking with contractors and kind of seeing what's happened there in the industry?
I would say, yeah, there is a change for sure. Because like in the COVID economy, it was very much like, not what is, how much is it going to cost? It's like, when are you available? Because like availability, if you had an open spot in your schedule, you're getting hired. It's pretty like, who can get here the soonest? Was kind of more the thing that won you the bid, during that economy. And today that's not really so much the case. People are having, what I'm seeing by and large is companies are still stable, companies are still growing, but they're having to work harder to close the same amount of work in the sales process. Again, go develop yourself as a salesperson. But anyway,
Yeah,
um, but the companies that I see that are struggling, I'm speaking in generalities. Of course, there can be exceptions, but by and large, most times they're younger companies that never had a marketing engine built. Their phone just rang their
yeah,
whole existence as a business for the last 2 to 4 years, and they just thought that was normal. Well, hello, it's not normal. And doing things like the annoying things of remembering to get a Google review from your client, yes, that is necessary. And if you're not doing that kind of thing, that is the stereotype of a company that is struggling today. If you don't have a process for marketing, getting the leads, you can't sell if you don't have the leads.
yeah, yeah. And even if companies have to spend money on marketing where maybe they didn't have to in the past,
Yeah.
or advertising, at least now you can just build it into your budget,
Yep.
right? So things aren't necessarily, they shouldn't necessarily cost the company anything,
No,
right?
they
It
shouldn't
comes
cost you.
more of, no, I'm going to build into my budget. And and then let your sales skills and, the way that you're approaching that, let that carry your team. And but now, Weston, so I know we had spoke about, top line revenue, direct costs, you got overhead, I guess. What is a net profit goal that you kind of see, or that you would recommend for companies to build in for
Well,
their
when
company?
we're when someone joins SynkedUP, we actually had pair them up with a dedicated financial coach to build their actual budget with them, because so much of the time it's like the first time they build a budget or they don't quite understand them. So we have someone that works with them, looks over their shoulders, and basically works as a consultant to help them build their first budget and get them confident that, okay, cool, this is right. But we when we do that, we don't let them build a budget for less than 10% net profit. It's anything below 10%. It's just too razor thin. The
Yeah,
smallest little thing. Like 10% on a $500,000 company is 50,000. A series of bad breakdowns could wipe you out, right? So it's just too small. It's just too razor thin. So 10% is minimum. 15 to 20 is the sweet spot. We have some that do go all the way up into the 30s, net, not gross. Those are more the exception, though. The exception, I mean. But the 15 to 20% is the sweet spot because that will produce enough of cash that you can grow on cash flow without debt. 10%, it's going to be tough to grow quickly on cash flow. You know what I mean? Like it's just not enough there. And another thing I'll clarify is the net profit is not the owner's pay. This is after the owner is paid and there's like a normal salary for what the value that they're providing to the business. This is the money that's left over after the owner's been paid, not before.
Awesome stuff, Weston. And as for synced up, so I guess what are you kind of seeing as, like looking into the future? I know you guys are always working on different things within the software and really kind of listening to your customers as well. But kind of looking into the future, what are you seeing as kind of like the vision for synced up and maybe the biggest bottlenecks contractors are facing, or even just the vision, as you're kind of building that roadmap?
Yeah. So our company vision is to end entrepreneurial poverty for contractors. Like so much of the contracting story is I love to do this work. I did it for another company. Let me start doing it. I want to build a business, the entrepreneurial itch, the freedom that you get from it and all of that. And I don't know if you've ever read the E-Myth book, but that is a classic story for contractors. Meaning, like you love to do the work, so you start a business doing the work, and then you realize that succeeding in business is only about 10% of knowing how to do the work.
Yep.
And a big problem in that is contractors that are literally artists or like amazing at the work that they do, but they're not business people, and so they are starving entrepreneurs. And when I say ending entrepreneurial poverty, I just mean that let's get all of these, like I love the American like small business economy, like people that know how to do a thing, want to go provide a service to the market and own a business doing it. I think that's fantastic. I want to support that. My wife's from Romania where that is not doesn't exist. It's non-existent. And so I love that like people that are net positive contributors to society, I want to make them successful, right? I want them to earn money doing it and thrive, not survive. So that's kind of like our company. Like I want to empower those people that are out there trying to, you know, build something great for themselves and their family. And the biggest bottlenecks I see to that is the financial problem of what should I charge, which is the budgeting aspect that we've been talking about. But it's also the bottleneck I will name it like this. They start the business because they love to do the work. They think that they are a doer of the work. But what they really are, if you are a business owner, is you're not a doer of the work. You are a builder of systems and processes. Systems and processes are what will set you free from the entrepreneurial prison of I'm the only one that can do anything. I'm the only one that can get a quote out. I'm the only one that can take a phone call from a client. I'm the only one that can schedule a job. I'm the only one that can do a job. I'm the only one that can send a bill. I'm the only one that can, it just goes on and on and on. And that is a miserable existence that will crush you. And systems and processes are the keys out of that. The tricky part is it feels harder to build a system and process than it does to just do the task myself again one more time. Just do it again myself one more time. Do it again myself one more time. On and on and on for years and years and years. And if we just step back, take a breath, take a little bit of extra time, build a system and process to the point where someone else can do it, now you have something that can actually a business that you feel that you own instead of the business owning you. So in SynkedUP, that's what we're all about is, ending entrepreneurial poverty from a financial aspect, making sure everybody's charging the correct rates, but then also kind of building this plug and play system and process for their business that they can just sign up, start building their estimating templates. The pricing is all automated based off of their budget. And suddenly even their office admin can build a quote. All they have to do is plug in the measurements, right? Um, Even their crew lead has all the information they need in the digital job portal to do the job without them. The job costing is happening automatically. They don't have to reinvent the wheel and stand up a whole process themselves. All of that is what we're about at SynkedUP, and really it's in service to enabling that blue collar contractor, the American dream. It's like we want to be the engine, the horsepower that fuels that and makes that actually a reality instead of a, well, that's what I hoped would happen, but all I have is I own a job.
Yeah, yeah. I I think it's it's a tragedy, where some companies are working hard, and um, I think people deserve, when you put in that work, right? I think you deserve to be able to, make a good profit and support your family, right? And really get to that point. And there's no shortcuts to it. I think it's, whether it's investing in synced up and other resources, um, it's all awesome stuff. Now, Weston, anything else you'd like to leave the community with before we close out here?
Well, I'll share some resources I have. Like if you're curious, like we have a bunch of like free things on our website. Like we have a man-hour calculator that is really the budgeting logic in a super uber simplified form. Like picture, a car payment calculator where you plug in a few numbers and bam, it spits out your car payment. Like it's a little bit like that. You plug in a few numbers and it spits out about what you should be charging per hour. And of course, that kind of, you can then go down the budgeting and really start splitting hairs. But so we have that. I'll give you a link that you can put into the show notes of this episode, and your listeners can click on it, use it. We also have a free budgeting tool, which is kind of like the upgrade. They're all free. Like after you mess with the budgeting, the man-hour calculator for 5 minutes, you probably want to go down the budgeting tool and spend 45 minutes with it. We also have a free production rate calculator that helps you build templates for your estimating. Like so many contractors tell me, well, I don't know my production rates. Well, actually you do. There's just a method with which we have to excavate and find and mine the answers, right?
Yeah,
Um, and so we have all those, we have a whole library of free resources like that it's basically synkedup.com/resources is where they are. I'll get you the link. We also have a low priced course that we called How to Price My Job. And it's just at howtopricemyjob.com. It's like $200 one-time cost, and you get lifetime access to this course that basically teaches you all the mechanics and the math that SynkedUp does under the hood. It teaches it to you with free resources like manual, like PDF sheets, calculator sheets, and like non like little. It basically teaches you how to do manually what SynkedUp does automatically.
sure.
So, and it kind of teaches, it goes into a lot of the school of hard knocks as well, like the realities that we've learned over the years of how to bid jobs profitably, the things that will trip you up even if you've got perfect on paper math, that kind of thing, like bidding in full days versus partial days, all kinds of things like that. So those are all resources. I just want to make sure that everybody that's out there that's curious, what is synced up? Should I even have it? I don't know. Well, you can kind of get to know us a little bit down through those resources, even if you're using synced up, that people love them. Um, and finally, if you are like, dude, I don't want to reinvent the wheel, just show me how to install this engine into my business. Well, just go to synkedup.com, book a call, and we'll essentially figure out if the problem that SynkedUp solves is the problem that you need solved. I don't really believe in twisting arms in sales. That's not really I don't like to look at sales like that. It's like literally sales is solving problems. And either we solve the problem you have or we don't. And the sooner we both know that, the better for you. So we're not wasting your time and we're not trying to sell you something you don't need.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah. And if you want to follow me on my daily, I'm most active on Instagram. So most of my daily stuff's on Instagram stories and that kind of thing. And the handle is just at synced up. And yeah, love to have you follow along.
Awesome stuff, Weston. Well, thanks again for joining me here. Really appreciate it, and hope you have a nice rest of your day, right?
Absolutely, Joe. Good talking to you again.
Talk to you soon.